of the SUTL Innovation Grant Program Technical Assistance Workshop for the Ecosystem Building Grants. So this was supposed to have been live the week before last, and unfortunately, due to technical difficulties, we got interrupted. So I'm testing this out, hoping it works. If you have a chance to see this, that means it worked out. So we'll go ahead and get started. All right, so here's a quick rundown of what we'll go over. I should be able to post this presentation online, so you should be able to go through it yourself. But for this presentation, we'll go through kind of a background on the program, what the program structure looks like this year, the process, the application form, and since this is not live, I'll go through some frequently asked questions and direct you to where you can ask further questions. So quickly, here is some background on the program. In June of 2016, this program was approved as part of the Innovation and Growth Fund policy. So this is a $1 million annual grant program, and it came from a fund, the Innovation and Growth Fund, which was originally a $10 million investment in innovation in Sacramento. So the guiding principles of this particular fund were listed here. The City of Sacramento's SUTL Innovation Grant Program is designed to catalyze innovation in the startup community and prepare Sacramento for the industries of the future. So this was kind of the guiding principles. Actually, I said the fund, but of this grant program, which was the main idea was supporting startup enablers and building the innovation ecosystem in Sacramento. So as a part of this fund and a part of this program, there were 4 major problems that we saw in Sacramento and continue to see in Sacramento. That is too few opportunities for startups to grow, that there's too little venture capital investment, that there's too little interest from big companies to come to Sacramento, and there's too much reliance on existing industries. So kind of these are where the program started, but also where we see it today. These are the things that the program is looking to address and looking to make an impact on as we continue forward. So to date, this program, which you may have previously heard of as RAILS, has funded 26 organizations in 2 cohorts. So the organizations a part of these cohorts were accelerator programs, maker spaces, incubator programs, mentorship organizations, talent acquisition organizations, which is you can think of as training programs, and marketing organizations. And the total amount of funding given out to these organizations was almost $2 million. So kind of going into this next round, and some of what we did with the last round, we have aligned the program with what we have our office, the innovation team as part of the Office of Innovation and Economic Development, have aligned ourselves with, which is this framework that we call the Sacramento Urban Technology Lab, which is now a part of the name of the grant. So you may be asking, what is SUTL? So the Sacramento Urban Technology Lab is this embodiment of a framework where government, industry, and academia come together to transform Sacramento into a living laboratory. So that it's a place where entrepreneurs, advanced technology businesses, and academic institutions can test, develop, and scale their ideas, products, and services. So Sacramento is a very diverse place. not just in the populations that we serve, but we have many different types of communities. You have, anywhere from the grid, the city, typical urban grid, to the more sprawled out suburban areas. And of course, our residents are very diverse in their stages of life, their ages, their backgrounds, their socioeconomic statuses. Sacramento really is a city where testing is ideal and very possible. So the idea behind SUTL is that we're helping grow the the possibilities for technology and the access to technology for residents in our city. As a part of SUTL, there are 7 industry verticals that we focus on. These verticals are areas that either Sacramento is already fairly strong or innovating, or they're areas that are emerging industries kind of throughout the world or the country. So I'll list the 7 verticals. They're also on our website. Those verticals are government and civic technology, health, IT, and life sciences, clean tech and sustainability, food systems, Internet of Things and cybersecurity, mobility, and then the final one, which is also, as we call it, a horizontal, is workforce development, because workforce development touches every one of the other verticals. It's similar in the IoT and cybersecurity realm. They kind of touch on every one of the other verticals as well, but workforce development truly touches on everything. So during this round of the SUTL Innovation Grant Program, we're focusing on 3 verticals, which are the IoT and cybersecurity verticals, mobility, and health, IT, and life sciences verticals. And that has to do with the fact that our office is currently working on projects in those verticals, and we've seen increased interest. So it's more to align the work we're doing with the grants that we're giving out, to kind of amplify those things, versus being unnecessarily restrictive. But this is just the 3rd iteration of this grant program. I'm not going to make any promises, but there's always the possibility that we don't get the results we want, and we do end up changing in the next year. So with that being said, these are areas we expect to have a high amount of collaboration, or opportunities to collaborate, and will feed very nicely into things that we see on the horizon in the next couple years. So we want to make sure that even if you're not able to put together an application for this year in these verticals, the next couple years you know what to expect. So there are a few other changes that have happened this year for 2020. The pot of funding is still $1 million, but we've broken it out into 3 processes. So this first part, which is the grant process that's open right now, is the ecosystem building grants. And the objective of those is to build workforce pipelines to specific industries for startups and individuals in Sacramento. That pot of funding is $500,000. The second bit is the SUTL ecosystem marketing, which will consist of 2 RFPs, one to document the entire program, so that's like photography and videography, and the other will be marketing, for the 3rd part of the program. And then as a part of the marketing, we intend to offer co-working marketing grants so that co-working spaces can have some funding to market themselves. The 3rd piece of this program is the Startup Growth Competition. That's that is intended to help high growth scale ups locate and grow in Sacramento. So that more information will be coming on that soon in the next few months, we're expecting. So keep an eye out for that. And going back, I was talking, well, each of those pieces has a little bit of the other funding. So again, the whole entire program is $1 million. The ecosystem building grants is $500,000, and the other $500,000 is between the marketing, the competition, and a small amount set aside for administering the program. So that. All right. So the objectives of this SUTL innovation grant program. Overall, each of the 3 categories are listed here, and I'll go through them really quickly. That is to expand the reach of entrepreneurial support organizations, to increase opportunities for startups to grow, increase the number and viability of startups, increase VC investment in Sacramento, marketing broadly to change the perception of the ecosystem, foster and facilitate high-growth startups, encourage targeted collaborations, and build key industry verticals. And so those all tie in to the 4 motivating problems that I mentioned earlier. So these objectives come straight from that. We have a lovely theory of change that we worked with an outside evaluator on during the last cohort of Rails to kind of vision where we're at and where we'd like to go with the program. And that is directly where these objectives have come from. So the Innovation and Growth Fund that I mentioned earlier, where the funding for this program comes from, has 6 of these guidelines that our funding, anything that we fund has to address. So those are, number 1, to create jobs. Number 2, make it easier to conduct business. Number 3, leverage funds with other private or public funds. So that's basically to fill financial gaps in projects and programs. 4, increase revenue to the city. 5, accelerate growth, which is it's designed to kind of promote businesses that engage in the commercialization of innovative research and products, or promoting emerging industries. Or 6, encourage diversity and inclusion in the innovation community. And so anything we fund has to address at least one of these points. So far, it's been pretty easy for that to happen. We haven't had any issues in projects we want to fund not meeting these criteria. So going into the program structure of the ecosystem building grants, which is the most important piece for all of you. Basically, these are the grants that are intended to build the workforce pipelines to the IoT, cybersecurity, mobility, health IT, and life science industries. The grant amounts that you can apply for are up to $100,000. This piece of the grant program looks the most like what Rails used to look like. So we anticipate seeing co-working spaces, incubators, accelerators, training programs applying, possibly maker spaces. We anticipate that those are the programs that will apply like in the past. One of the major differences is that we've taken out the grant categories and have taken out the minimum amount that can be applied for. And so the reasoning behind this is that we would really like grantees to be thoughtful about the amount that they're applying for, and not just apply for the minimum or maximum. So that's where the grant categories have gone away. The way the grant categories was laid out kind of touches on what our intention is with this program, which is the idea that we're building up the resources for startups to grow from the base up. So the training program aspect supports the need of startups to have a trained workforce to be able to support their ideas. So we'll talk a little bit about what that leadership training looks like. Then there's the incubator programs where startups will need to be able to take their idea from an idea to an actual company, similar with an accelerator to be able to grow their company, and co-working spaces to be able to support to be able to support the startups until they are large enough to be able to have their own space. So we anticipate as a part of this grant that that we'll see applications that are looking to find physical space or provide staffing for programming that's already offered or future or are offered in the future, marketing or market research, development of curriculum for training programs, or funding to, I guess, be able to have access to curriculum for training programs. So going back to this idea of training programs, what we would like to see this year is that if a training program is being offered, that it is connected with an employer, either formally or informally, to be able to create a pathway to jobs or internships. Or, and this part doesn't necessarily have to be connected to an employer, a leadership or a training program should be able to provide entrepreneurial skill development for someone who may be interested in starting their own company within these fields. If your program is primarily youth serving, we ask that it is either explicitly connected to jobs or internships, or that it provides an accredited certificate, badge, or certification to the participants you're serving. And so that is to be able to offer, to be able to do some kind of quality assurance on our end for what's being offered to the youth. So that's, you can, if you think about the types of opportunities that are out there for young people, they can range anywhere from a kind of basic coding class, I like to say hello world coding class, to programming a robot. We just want some way to say that the youth who are coming out of these programs are able to show a future employer something tangible. So if that's a job or an internship on their resume, or if that is a badge or certificate that they can show what skills they've learned, we'd like that to be an outcome of the programs that we fund with this particular grant for youth serving organizations. Now, if your program or project doesn't necessarily primarily serve youth, these are not required, but obviously it will look better. So goals and metrics. We are expecting that we would like to see your expected outcomes stated and the metrics that you'll be using to document those expected outcomes. So there are a couple questions on the application that address that. And really we'd like to see that the connection between these goals and the activities that you plan to undertake as a part of this project are connected. So also I'm very happy to kind of add questions if you don't see that there are questions that allow you to kind of link those together very well. I'm totally open to feedback, but this is what we're kind of hoping to see in your application, that that you have an idea of what the intended outcomes are, and that the things that you'll be doing as a part of this grant will be linked to those. So we'll also ask you for milestones and benchmarks, and what we'll use those for is we have our grantees submit quarterly reports, and we'll use those to kind of gauge your progress. And don't think that those are set in stone. As time goes on, we know that things change, but that'll be reflected in your quarterly reports as well. How success is changing or looks different. So we've seen some grantees get delayed in projects, and we've seen some who accomplish things way ahead of the time they expected. So don't think that you're necessarily obligating yourself in an application. All right, so the process. We're starting off kind of here of who can apply. The eligible organizations there on the left is mostly a suggestion, and who we anticipate will likely be applying. Really the biggest focus here is in the ineligible organizations. And this was kind of to be explicit about who we expect to not apply. In the past, we've stated public institutions are not eligible. So here we're just making kind of more clear if you have or if you are an organization that runs a property business improvement district, or you're a chamber of commerce, or a public agency, or a school that includes K through 9 and universities, we will not be accepting those applications. If you would like to work with one of those organizations, we're completely open to that. In fact, they make really great partners. They're very connected to the community. So for us, it was more of a kind of a funding decision. We don't believe those organizations have the same need for receiving our funding. Not that they don't ever need funding, but our funding may not be the best source of funding through this particular grant program. So again, you're welcome to work with them. They make great partners, but they are not eligible to submit their own applications. And then the last group on that list is Mayor's Tech Council organizations, and that is to avoid the appearance of impropriety. So the Mayor's Tech Council will serve as our reviewers for this application, and they do have kind of a weigh-in on what the program looks like. So any organizations who are represented on the Mayor's Tech Council are not eligible to apply for this grant program. But again, organizations on the left, they're great. We anticipate likely seeing applications from them. And if you have a question and think your organization may not be able to apply, feel free to submit it on the FAQ page, and we'll go through where that is. Minimum eligibility. So these are a couple requirements for your project. So first of all, projects must be located in the city of Sacramento. Your organization does not have to be located in the city, but your project must. So you should be serving city residents primarily. And that's just kind of the first thing. I've seen a couple variations of this question, and I have a pretty complicated one on the FAQ page right now if you want to check that out. If you need me to get more specific, if you have a really specific question, feel free to ask that on the FAQ page. But I hope that's pretty clear. So previous Rails grantees are eligible for funding under this program. Previously, which by previously I mean the last round, we set aside funding specifically for previous Rails grantees. This round we're not doing that. So if you have previously received a Rails grant, you are eligible to apply and are in the same competition pool as everybody else. You also, as an applicant, must be compliant with current or past city grants. We do have a question asking about whether or not or if you have received funding from the city in the past 3 years, and that's where you'll respond to what funding you've received from the city in the past 3 years, and we will be following up on that and the departments you've worked with just to make sure that you are compliant. Really quickly, one more thing I'll mention here, because I think I have it somewhere in the presentation, but I may not. You are able to submit multiple applications. So in last round, it was only one application that could be submitted. This round, you can submit as many applications as you like, kind of with that understanding that you may not be awarded everything you ask for, and that if your not so favorite project idea is the one that's picked, that you're just as ready to execute it as your favorite project idea. All right. So the timeline. The applications are due November 25th at 3 p.m. This is to catch those last minute technical difficulties. That's why it's not going to be at close of business or midnight. I believe I will inevitably get oh no, the system crashed when I was sending it email. So this will be right in the middle of the day. Please hit send, or please hit submit probably at least 5 minutes before, but there will be no exceptions. I don't believe I said this in my last presentation, but if you do submit your application after 3 p.m. And it says, sorry, no applications accepted, then no application is accepted. So please, 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 please submit your application before, well, earlier than November 25th at 3 p.m. Probably 2 p.m. would be the safest, but please don't wait until the last minute. We are accepting questions on the application page until November 18th at 11:30 p.m. So that is in the middle of the night, but questions can be answered at any point after that. So keep an eye out. If you submit your question at 11:30 p.m. and it is not answered at 11:35, just keep checking back on the page. You'll still be able to see all the questions that are on the question page. You just won't be able to submit your own new question after that point. So on December 6th, following that November 25th deadline, we anticipate that the pre-screening will be complete. Following that, we anticipate judging will be complete January 13th of 2020. So looking at the second full month there of January and next year. And then we anticipate notifying awardees on January 13th through the week of January 13th that they've been awarded. So if the deadline starts slipping, we may kind of keep you updated that you may hear later than that. But for right now, that's what we're targeting as the notification date. So with that in mind, we have a couple dates that we expect. But again, if there's a schedule change, these might slip a bit. So we anticipate bringing awards to council February 4th. So we don't have the council schedule yet for next year. We won't get that likely until maybe December, but provided there is a council meeting on February 4th, that's when we intend to take the awards to council for approval. Then in mid-February, we anticipate that being when projects begin. So in your application, when you're looking at when your project starts, it'll be mid-February that you'll be looking at, and then from there, anticipate 12 months out. So your project should be encompass 12 months, and then I don't know why I keep forgetting to put that into the PowerPoint. Your project, you should anticipate being 12 months long and beginning in mid-February. So any activities before your contract is executed, which we're hoping that the contract execution will happen early February. Any activities that happen before that, we can't fund. So any activities that you're hoping can be funded will need to begin after mid-February. But after the contract is executed, even if your paychecks haven't been received yet, you'll be able to begin your project activities. So, submission requirements. Applications are due on screen door by 3 p.m. on November 25th, just a friendly reminder. There's two major pieces of the application. So the first piece is the application form, which we ask that you answer all the required questions. There'll be a couple questions that are not required, and there are a couple conditional questions that you may or may not see. But we ask that you answer all the required questions, and then we ask for a project budget to be submitted. I'll go through the project outline, or the budget outline, or the budget template, but the budget you submit will outline how the grant funds will be used. So the budget you submit will not be your entire project budget. So if your project requires more funding than what you would receive from this grant, we don't want that outlined in your budget. What your budget outlines is what you'll be spending the money that the city gives you on. And we'll look at that template soon. So this is a selection process. And I kind of touched on it, but this is a little bit more in depth. So following that November 25th submission date, city staff will review for minimum criteria, which we'll go over here in a second. Following that review, we may ask for you to revise a proposal or submit additional information. This may not be the most likely thing to happen, but kind of keep that in mind. If there's an application that we see that might be missing something, we could ask you to submit it. So following the city staff reviewing for the minimum criteria, the applications will go to the Mayor's Tech Council to review and score using the scoring criteria, which we'll also go over. Now this year we're not doing a pitch day like we did last year. Because of that, if the Mayor's Tech Council does feel the need to actually interview applicants, that may be something that they choose to do, and we will notify applicants if that is something that they choose to do. Not sure what the likelihood is on that, since we've kind of we've kind of tweaked the judging process for each year we've done it so far. But just keep that in mind. You may be asked for an interview during this process, and it would likely be early January if that is something the Mayor's Tech Council would like. Then the Mayor's Tech Council will conduct a final review to nominate top projects and recommend preliminary awards and amounts to the city manager and council. So, after they've gone through and scored, after if they choose to ask for more information, they will come up with their top project list and for the city council to review. Then the city council will amend or adopt those preliminary awards and amounts. And that will be that final step that will go to council in early February. So here are the pre-screening criteria that staff will use. And these are the things we're hoping to have addressed in the application. Again, I'm totally open for feedback on whether or not you'll be able to demonstrate these things in your application with the questions we have. So we've got in here a proven track record, clear actionable plans that achieve program objectives, fills an industry gap or local market need. City funds would be catalytic to the project's implementation, stated realistic program deliverables and metrics, and application completeness. So these are just kind of the minimum that we see as the project needing to have to be a potential fit for the RAILS program, the SUTL Innovation Grant Program, the Ecosystem Building Grants. So these are the six pre-screening criteria that staff will be using. So following that, these criteria are what the judges will be using. You can see a scoring rubric in the you can see a scoring rubric for this in the guidelines, and we may ask you to supply more information, mostly on the cash match funding portion. If your project does make it further, that could be a piece of the additional information that we ask for. So here we have 20% of your score being on potential impact, 20% being on capacity. So we'll be looking at the financial capacity, your personnel capacity, expertise and credentials, and sufficient lead time. 30% being on financial sustainability, so that's whether your program will be able to continue in future years. 20% on equity and inclusion, and 10% on community partnerships and collaboration. Finally, your project will get 10 additional points if you're able to show 10% or 100% cash match funding for the grant amount you apply for. So that does not include in-kind sponsorship. So if your organization or another organization, or even a combination of funding sources, if you're able to supply 100% cash match funding for the grant amount, you'll get 10 additional points towards your application score. So the application form. Let me switch screens. All right, so we will go over the application form. Let's try it like this, and hopefully you can see it well. So here's the application form. You can find it using this link up here, or from the our webpage, which is innovatesac.org/innovation-grants, and then click on Ecosystem Building Grants, and it'll take you there. But this is the main page on this site where you'll find the grant application. So right here up top, there are a few links that are important that you may miss because they're so tiny. The first is the frequently asked questions. So if you click this, and let me click this. I'm opening it up. Okay. All right, so this screen here will show you the questions that have been asked by others. Right now we have 5 questions on this site that other people have asked about the program. So feel free to take a look. Now if your question is not here, up at the top they have the option to ask a question. So I'm pointing this out because it's not super intuitive. You have to scroll down to see the other questions that have been asked, and then you're asking questions at the top. But if something is missing, if it's not covered in this or in the guidelines, feel free to submit your question. Sometimes we get questions that are in the guidelines, but again, it's, we will gladly answer your question. Let's see, going back to the application page here. Okay, so back to the application page. You can also click on Ask a Question, and that will take you to that, take you right to the top of that page where you can type in your name and your email and your question. So this page has kind of background information on the grant program here on the left hand side. We also have a couple files that are, of interest. So you've got an overview of this grant program, the guidelines, and your budget template. We also will have the slides from this presentation here in the files. On the right hand side is this big button that says apply. It's also, fortunately or unfortunately, got my contact email. So if you need to get a hold of me, it is there. But if you have questions, I ask that you submit them to the FAQ because this is a competitive application process. We want to give everyone a fair chance of seeing the questions that you have asked. It's got the deadline to submit your application as well as the deadline to submit questions, and the amount of funding that you'll receive or you can apply for. We also have the workshop dates, and this one needs to be updated because it is Friday, and mentions, as well as the Eventbrite where you can RSVP and get up-to-date information on the workshops. And then it's got the reviewers who will be, you could say, judging your application. So let's go into the application form. Now, if you have started an application, you can click here to view that application. And let me make sure that you are seeing what I'm seeing. Yes, you are. Great. So you can put in the email address that you started it with, and they will send you a link to continue. Otherwise, you will hit this big button that says apply here. So now let me also show you this cool trick. Let's say you do start your application, and then want to go back, or let's say I can say, oh well, let's do this. I'm gonna open up a new page. I'm opening up a new page right now, and while I'm doing this, actually, let's do this one. So if you've started an application and you go back, or copy the link like I did and paste it and change. Well, if you open the page again from your web page, you'll see this option, which is to either resume a draft or to start a new draft. So this is if you're still working and then you decide, well, let me open up another window and make a new application for my second project while I'm doing the first one. You can do that. So you can either resume the one you're already working on, you can find a previous one that you started, or you can start a brand new one. So you are able to submit multiple grant applications. And if you have any technical difficulties, email me and I can possibly walk you through that. Now don't ask me questions that I can't, if you do start to ask me too many questions, I will probably send you to this here. But as far as technical assistance, I think I'm allowed to offer that. But if there's anything that starts to get to things that other people should know, or if I get too many people emailing me and saying, how do I start a new draft? I may need to make a video and upload it, but it should be pretty simple. And if you do a complete draft and go away from it, like close a window and come back, you should be able to start a whole brand new one. It should just say apply, or find a previous one by going here. Let me switch back to the screen. This one. All right, so going back to the application screen. So we have a couple required, like I mentioned earlier, which is your name, your email, your phone number, your organization name, kind of what you're applying as. The website is not required, but highly recommended. And we've kind of broken the application into kind of different parts. It may make a difference to you, it may not make a difference to you, but overall we've got the program description here, we've got in-depth project details, and again, this is where we start to talk about the 12 months. Let's see, we're asking for your metrics and your objectives. We ask about how you will address equity and inclusion, which we can talk about here in a second. We ask about the finance and your budget and ask you to upload your budget, your proposed budget. And we ask here about kind of match funding, We also do want to know about in-kind funding, even if it's not cash match or cash funding. We do want to know what you'll be receiving as in-kind funding as well. And then lastly, in the last section here, we ask about the total amount of city funds awarded or received in the last 36 months, which is about 3 years. And then if you so desire to tell us anything else as a part of your application that was not mentioned, you have 50 words to do so. So it'll ask you if you want to see a preview. Okay, I'm not going to be able to see a preview here. But when you submit your application, it will send you a copy to your email that you shared with us. So now we'll take a look real quick at the budget template. So this is what is provided in the grant application on the application page as the budget template. So this page here is where you're going to submit your items. So there's a category drop down here: label, materials, rentals, marketing, intern, other. These are categories of what the item is. So largely we expect that this will cover the things that you plan to do. You can use other, but I haven't seen too many others that actually are unique to and do not fall under these. But that doesn't mean it's not possible. Here we'll ask for your item description. It doesn't have to be super detailed, but we ask that it not be super vague either. So if it's marketing, you can say Facebook ads. If it's materials, you can say, if you're like purchasing camera equipment, you can say, cameras and equipment, or software if it's video software. You don't have to get super specific on what the brand is and what the make and model is. We don't need that specific of information, because it's always likely that you end up finding something that's a better deal, or learning information about what you want to buy that maybe it's not the right fit. So you don't have to get super specific. No need to tie yourself to a specific make and model, like it said. But we do want a good idea of what you'll be purchasing. Quantity is if you need cameras, 5 cameras. So you could say cameras, 5 units. Is more applicable if you're buying, like if you're renting something, or if you're paying someone. So if it's cameras, quantity might be 5, units might be cameras. If it's labor, quantity might be 40, units might be hours. So that's kind of what we're looking for there. And this cost is cost per unit. So your total will end up being multiplied. It'll be calculated. It's already kind of programmed in there. So it's quantity times your cost ends up as your total here. So I'll show you the sample budget real quick. So for example, let's say you are giving stipends to staff. So you have 30 stipends that are $500 each. Your total is $15,000. Your project management is 100 hours at $50 an hour, etc. So take a look at the budget template. The sample budget is on page 2, and those should be able to guide you as so you can get a good idea of what we're looking for. It doesn't have to be super specific, but we do kind of want to get an idea of what you'll be doing. Let's get back to the presentation. All right. So now we'll go through really quickly the inclusive economic and community development. So this is what kind of the direction the city is going right now in taking a look at economic and community development from a standpoint of of being inclusive of everyone who lives and works in the city, and kind of what barriers there have and haven't been to different communities. So with that in mind, I just wanted to share with you really quickly kind of our own statements of inclusion. So here we have that the City of Sacramento is committed to ensuring fair and just treatment, access, opportunity, and advancement for all people, while identifying and eliminating barriers that have prevented the full participation of some groups. In alignment with the city's inclusive economic development priorities, SUTL aims to expand economic opportunities that benefit underserved and underrepresented communities, thereby reducing social, racial, health, and economic disparities in those communities. So as you're shaping your application, we just want you to consider or keep these things in mind. We would, like the programs that we support to kind of be mindful of these priorities. With that being said, there is a question in the application about priority neighborhoods that you may or may not be serving with your applications. In the past, we offered this as, I believe, bonus points. This round, it's not explicitly included outside of the kind of diversity and inclusion criteria, scoring criteria, but we do ask if your project will be located in any priority neighborhoods. So as you're submitting your application, as you're thinking about your project, we just ask that you keep in mind what areas of the city would be best served by what you are offering. So before I get into, I believe the questions are next. Yep, before I get into the questions, just a quick reminder to read the guidelines. We try to be as thorough as possible with the guidelines, and be transparent. With that being said, it may not answer all of the questions that you have, but I think it's a good starting place, and I hope that it is thorough enough to be able to give you an idea of what we expect a good application would look like. And yes. So now we'll jump right into these frequently asked questions. So these are questions that I've had in the past from people. And while we're at it, I may even go over the questions that are currently in the FAQ. But these are questions that we've had in the past from people for our past cohorts and anticipated getting again. So here they are for your viewing pleasure. The first question, do in-kind contributions count for the one-to-one matching funds? No, they do not. You must have a cash match. Number 2, can I put up the funds for the one-to-one cash match myself? Absolutely. So we do have a question asking, please list the sources and amounts of any additional funds that will be provided to the project. And that is where you can share the funds that you will be putting up. And So it does not have to just be you as well. It can be others. So it's kind of in a free response format. It's not in a list format. So you'll kind of have to list yourself, but there is a question where you will be able to submit that information. So just answered, but can matching funds come from multiple sources? Absolutely. Next question, if my organization is not based in city limits, can we apply for a grant? Yes, but your project must be based in or primarily serve residents in the city limits. And so it can also be an online program, but it will need to be serving Sacramento City residents. Can my organization submit multiple applications for different projects? Yes. There are no limits to the number of applications that can be submitted for an organization. So submit as many as you'd like. I do ask that if you submit, if you have multiple pieces of an application that you would like to submit for funding, only submit them if you believe that you will be able to find funding for the other pieces, or if your project will still be able to continue if not all of the pieces are funded by this grant program. So if you want to start a co-working space and build an incubator in it, if we only fund your incubator program, make sure that you have a space in mind if your co-working space is not funded. So basically, don't make the applications that you submit, if you submit multiple applications, don't make them dependent on one another for funding. Otherwise, if you are not funded for all of them, you may have a problem. Let's see. The next question. Oh, that was the last question. So I will share these resources with you. The guidelines, application portal, and Q&A can be found on our website here, innovatesac.org/grants/ecosystem-building. You can contact us at team@innovatesac.org, or as was displayed, my contact email is also on the application page. But again, for FAQs, we ask that you submit them through the Screen Door site there. Upcoming workshops, it's correct on here, but this Friday we will have an in-person workshop at 6 p.m. in New City Hall. That's here, room 1119. That's on the first floor. We'll have one more online workshop, which will be live provided all of this works out, on Thursday, November 23rd at 11:30 p.m. Oh my goodness, 11:30 a.m. That's a typo. I will not be awake at 11:30 p.m. And then you can find the information for these workshops at innovatesac.eventbrite.com. And that is all for today. And again, please use that FAQ site for questions, and please read the guidelines.